Hello, Clash fans! Tribal Damage coming at you today with what I'm hoping will be a little bit more clarity on my position that the Glitch Gauntlet, Giant Gauntlet, I keep calling it the Glitch Gauntlet because it's a glitch, that the Giant Gauntlet combined with the Rage Vial is, in many circumstances, most indeed no more valuable than the Vamp Stash plus the Barbarian Puppet. Now, I make this claim because while the Giant Gauntlet is, of course, very valuable at reducing damage, and the splash damage is amazing, the Barbarian Puppet with the summoning of 44 additional Barbarians is actually something that in many scenarios is just as good as the Giant Gauntlet, but it does not cost an extra 1,800 glowy ore to max it out. So, here's what we have. We have a couple of scenarios where I laid out some bases and said, well, let's just take a look. Let's go ahead and pair the Vial along with the Giant Gauntlet and send the Barbarian King and see how well he performs going after these different sets of defenses. So I went ahead and dropped him in, let him take a little bit of damage, and then triggered the Giant Gauntlet, and we wind up with a big, massive Barbarian King plowing his way through a couple of those defenses, working his way through some cannons, and, of course, coming away from this attack with, let's just eyeball that as somewhere in the neighborhood of, about 2/3 of his hit points. So that's with the Rage Vial and the Barbarian Gauntlet. We're going to go ahead and compare that to the Barbarian Puppet combined with the Vamp Stash. Now, what you'll notice here is I did not put any pets on the Barbarian King. I just want to let him go with his own ability because, of course, the pets can make a big difference. Now, I did put a Wizard Tower in there along with the Multi-Archer Tower and a Mortar so that the Barbarians can actually take some damage from those splash defenses as well, because I didn't want to stack this completely in favor of the Barbarian Puppet. Now what we have is the Barbarian King done with his piece, kind of like he did with the Rage Vial and the Giant Gauntlet, but instead he's going to finish this one out with a little bit more hit points than we had with this particular setup through the base. And I know what you're going to say, depending on whether or not you favor the Giant Gauntlet, the Glitch Gauntlet. You're going to say, but trample damage, you shouldn't be using that. There's so many other places. I get it. We're going to go ahead and go in with another example, another layout. This one has some skeleton traps included, and this is the Giant Gauntlet along with the Rage Vial, and of course, skeletons can be problematic for the regular Barbarian King because he has to stop and strike them individually, where the Giant Gauntlet, of course, gives him the benefit of being able to plow right through them with his splash damage. So in this instance, we did add a couple of small bombs and some skeletons, and it looks like our Barbarian King comes away with, let's call it 80%-ish of his hit points. We're going to wind up going after the same layout again, but again, this time with the Vamp Stash and the Barbarian Puppet. Again, we've got some skeletons that are going to wind up coming out of here, and we do have a couple of small bombs that we're going to wind up triggering, which, of course, combined with the Mortar and a Multi-Archer Tower and the Wizard Tower, can certainly wind up providing some problems. What we do see is those Barbarians coming in pretty handy at helping take down some of these other defenses. Those Barbarians are all gone, and the Barbarian King is now going one-on-one against these defenses, and in this one he comes out with a little bit less hit points than he had in the pairing with the Giant Gauntlet and the Rage Vial. So we kind of flip-flop. So the first time he had a few more hit points left with the Barbarian Puppet and the Vamp Stash. In this one he had a little bit more with the Giant Gauntlet. So we're going to move on to the next setup, where we decided to pack things in nice and tight. So this is all super in favor of the Giant Gauntlet because I put them all right next to each other. Now, there is, of course, no room for any bombs or traps in between there. We did stack some skeleton spells on the back end, and the Giant Gauntlet paired with the Rage Vial, he makes very short work of this kind of layout here and moves on with, about 90% of his hit points, I would say. Compare that with the Vamp Stash coupled with the Barbarian Puppet, where, of course, there's no room for giant bombs and no bombs in the middle of this here, so those Barbarians are going to have an opportunity to shine. But, of course, the Mortar is a little bit of a pain in the butt, and those skeletons, we're having to fight through all those skeletons. So, yeah, it's a little legion of Barbarians fighting against a legion of skeletons, and the Mortar, being able to deal all of its extra damage to those Barbarians on its way through, means that the Barbarians ended up going down, And the Barbarian King comes away from this one with, we're going to say, right around 75 to ish, about 75% of his hit points compared with the nearly 90%, not to mention the fact that the Barbarian with the Giant Gauntlet and the Rage Vial finished that off much quicker. So there we stack something very heavily in favor of the Barbarian King with the Giant Gauntlet. But we're going to be really honest here, you don't see those kind of setups. You're more likely to see stuff like this where things are very well spaced out. So yes, in that idealized scenario, when everything was packed in nice and tight, that one definitely very clearly and firmly favored the Barbarian King with the Giant Gauntlet. Here we decided to go ahead and have him attack a very strong plethora of defenses, but we're spacing things out more realistically with what we wind up seeing in the course of regular attacks, where the Barbarian King is not able to capitalize on that splash damage. He is trying to plow his way through some of these high hit point, high damage output defenses, and he is struggling a little bit. His damage reduction is now gone, no more ability, and he does not manage to take down all 9 of these defenses. So he does go down before taking out the 2 cannons and the X-bow. Let's take a look with that same layout using the Vamp Stash and the Barbarian Puppet. So we let him start taking a little bit of damage, then we go ahead and trigger the ability, and this is an opportunity where the Barbarian Puppet can actually shine. You see, these Barbarians ended up not being targeted by the mortar because it was already shooting at the Barbarian King, and they were able to help take out a few more defenses, giving the Barbarian King an opportunity to actually survive some of these, take out a few more defenses. So where in the first attack he ended up having 2 of the cannons and an X-bow left, in this attack he manages to get everything down until the multi-archer tower winds up surviving. I would say that one is more in favor of the Barbarian Puppet combined with the Vamp Stash because he managed to take down more of those defenses. That being said, let's go ahead and move on to, oh no, I'm getting mixed up on which one was which. Oh, which one's this one? Is this the one with, I probably, maybe I didn't do, oh, I added the Barbarian King. That's what I did. I added the Barbarian King into this one. And we are going with, this is the it's the same setup that we had before, but I replaced the middle defense with the Barbarian King. And in this instance here, the Vamp Stash with the Barbarian Puppet manages to take down the enemy Barbarian King along with all of those other defenses. Now I replaced the Barbarian King with the mortar. This is a little bit more realistic, I think, to the kind of stuff that you encounter in the core of a base, where the mortars are more traditionally sitting on the outside. So we'll just say he had 40-ish% of his, 45% of his hit points after having destroyed all of those defenses, and that was using the Barbarian Puppet along with the Vamp Stash. Let us now compare that one to, this is actually what I meant to select first. It's that layout. We swapped the mortar with the Barbarian King, and we're going to go ahead and let the Barbarian King take on his neighbor, the enemy Barbarian King, using the Giant Gauntlet and the Rage Vial. He does, of course, make short work of the Barbarian King, and because of the proximity of the Barbarian King to the X-bow in the corner, he was able to capitalize on some of that splash damage, which does indeed happen sometimes in the core of the base. Whether it's a skeleton, an enemy clan castle troop, or an enemy hero, when that gauntlet is triggered, you do have an opportunity to strike other defenses. So here, the Barbarian King against this layout did not manage to destroy all of the buildings, whereas when we replaced that mortar with a Barbarian King, the the Barbarian Puppet combined with the Vamp Stash actually managed to get all of those defenses down. So now we are on to this layout here, where I know what you're thinking, but trample damage, what about all the giant bombs? Cool, I get it, giant bombs, they're a thing. So we went ahead and added the Barbarian King, and we are going with the Rage Vial and the Giant Gauntlet. Same situation, I triggered each time. I started the attack when the enemy Barbarian King was on the other side of the Barbarian King altar. Just that way, there was a similar consistency in how the enemy king was approaching our Barbarian King. So the enemy Barbarian King goes down, those first 5 defenses go down, and then our Barbarian King winds up getting taken out after destroying 5 of those buildings. That is with the Rage Vial and the Giant Gauntlet. When we put him through the same thing with the Giant Bombs in here, we wind up in a situation where the Barbarians now have to contend with the Giant Bombs, and with the last attack, where we had no giant bombs, the raged barbarians were able to take out all those extra defenses, but the giant bomb destroys them all, and our barbarian king manages only to take down the same number of defenses as with the Rage Vial and the Giant Gauntlet. Okay, that's those. So now we've got one, was it this one? One last example. I think this is the last example we were going with here. It is the, what did we do differently with this one? This is the Rage Vial and the Giant Gauntlet. I added, I don't know what's different. Oh, we added the Grand Warden. That's what it is. This one is the same layout that we had with the Giant Bombs, and we are just adding a Grand Warden, because part of the benefit of the Giant Gauntlet is, of course, that the Giant Gauntlet is making the Barbarian King invincible for the entire duration of the Giant Gauntlet when it is paired with the Eternal Tome. And in this scenario here, we have absolutely no problem whatsoever making it through all these buildings, because right now that Giant Gauntlet ability should still be taking 40% of the damage, but instead it was taking no damage for the entire duration. The Barbarian King and the Warden managed to make it through, and the Eternal Tome protects them from the first Giant Bomb, but then, of course, they take a little bit of damage from the second, and they waltz off with, 60% of the hit points on the King and 45% of the hit points on the Warden. Now, how about the comparison with the Grand Warden and the Barbarian King with the Vamp Stash and the Barbarian Puppet? We do the same exact thing. We put the Barbarian King down, we drop the Warden, we trigger the ability, and then we trigger the Warden's Eternal Tome. So now we've also got some invincible Barbarians who wind up running through here under Rage and taking out some stuff. Now, because of the timing and the pathing on the Barbarians, the Grand Warden does wind up sustaining quite a bit of damage here, and this is something that absolutely could wind up happening during the course of a regular attack. So unfortunately, our Grand Warden is barely clinging to life, where the Barbarian King has a lot more health. So we're going to have to compare what was a Giant Gauntlet-wearing Barbarian King with about 60% of his hit points and a Warden with about 40 to this one where the Warden is literally on his last leg, but the King does still have a little army of barbarians marching at his side. I feel like the main point that I want to make here is, while a lot of people are very excited about the Giant Gauntlet, and rightfully so because it is a cool piece of equipment, you have to pour so much more ore into that Giant Gauntlet to get situations that honestly don't seem that much more compelling in most instances. For that reason, I am strongly recommending people save on upgrading that Giant Gauntlet for now. Maybe take it to level 18 if you want to, because it's still okay at level 18, but the extra 3, so level 21, 24, and 27, all require 600 of that precious glowy ore, and it is harder to come by. So just food for thought, sharing my preferences. Of course, this is coming from a lot of practice and testing that I've done in the development box, and I am sporting on all of my main accounts. The Vamp Stash is maxed, the Barbarian Puppet is maxed. I'm telling you, is a very, very valuable combination that honestly, in most scenarios that I've seen, holds up really well when being compared to the Giant Gauntlet. I forgot to sell myself, of course. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out my podcast, Inside Clash with Trample Damage. Follow me on TikTok, follow me on Instagram, follow me all the places I post things. I really hope you guys wind up enjoying this video, and we will check you out on the next one.